This Talking Flutes podcast is kindly sponsored by Trevor James Flutes, making life sound beautiful. You can show them some flute love by following them on Instagram at TJ Flutes, Trevor James Flutes on Facebook, and at trevorjamesflutes.com. Hello and welcome this week to Talking Flutes Extra with me, Jean-Paul Wright. Thank you so much for your continued feedback. Claire and I love receiving your messages, and we're creating quite a nice little pile of more of your questions to be answered in future pods, so thank you very much. Please continue to like, rate and follow us on whatever podcast channel you are listening to, as this allows others to find us more easily when they do a search. Andrea Fisher is a musician, flutist, producer and entrepreneur. Probably more recognisable to most of you as FluterScooter, the designer of stylish and beautifully created instrument bags, which can be found adorning the shoulder of many of the world's leading instrumentalists. A performer in her own right, Andrea creates and produces all of her events and was the first flutist to perform with hologram technology. She is known for her unique and out-of-the-box performances, including working with a 3D light painter in Tokyo, through to the infamous concert in which she played flute and organ simultaneously. Yeah, I'm not joking. She plays flute with her left hand, the keyboard of the organ with her right hand, and she's working her feet on the pedals all at the same time. She has performed and recorded with the likes of John Legend, Ian Anderson, 50 Cent, Puff Daddy, to name a few. And she also composes and produces her own albums, most recently 3 beautiful meditation albums called AyaTunes. There's so much to this lady that without further wittering on my part, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give a wonderfully warm London welcome, because we're doing this over Zoom, to the multi-talented Andrea FluterScooter Fisher. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, thanks for having me on here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And where are you coming in from today?
I'm actually near Chicago right now. I came out here for an event, actually, that I performed my music from the albums that we're going to talk about. I performed it live for the first time at an outdoor immersive electric art installation, if you can imagine what that looks like. So I basically stood in front of the entrance. They had musicians and performers at different stages. So it was like an outdoor event. So people would just browse the different stations of artists and art. So I would welcome people in, and I played this meditative music, to just get people into that space of fantasy and just that vibe.
Well, it's very opportune that you sort of open the podcast with that area, because there's so many strands to you, Andrea, which means that you have to wear so many hats. And I'd like to focus on a mere 3 of them today. And I'm not lying, everybody. I'm not telling porky pies when I say that Andrea does juggle so many things, and when she gets an idea and a concept, she goes for it big style. So the 3 today are, as everybody knows you, FluterScooter, and then you as a musician, and then the wonderful new albums you've just released. But before we venture into that, how did this all start for you as a musician and a flute player?
So you want the real backstory?
Only to start with, yes. Just to give a...
Okay. Well, I always had a musical ear. There was a piano in my house, and I would just play things that I heard from a very young age. Like I would hear stuff on the radio and I would just play it. I think I was 3 or something, and started piano lessons. And my piano teacher from a really early age said, "Oh, she has this thing called perfect pitch." And that's really helped me in a lot of areas as far as piano and flute. And I learned flute when I was about 10 because I wanted to join the school band. Piano couldn't do it. So I was playing piano and flute. And then I actually learned the bassoon because there were shortages of, not a lot of people know that. I was a bassoonist for a few years in high school, and I became quite good at it, but I didn't like making reeds. And I even played contra.
Good grief.
I know.
So
Quite
you
a
heard it
change
here,
from.
folks. FluterScooter was a bassoon scooter.
Yeah. And I also, some of my first jobs were playing organ for churches, and I taught myself. Yeah, organ is pretty much like the piano, except with the pedals. So I taught myself pedal technique, which was totally wrong. There were ways to do it. I just kind of stomped all over the place, and learned that on my own. And I think you've probably seen, and Halloween is on
Hmm.
its way, and I'm sure that'll be shared all over the place again. The video where I play flute with one hand and keyboard with the other, and then pedals with my feet. That's basically like a culmination of my whole musical life
She,
with all those instruments.
Andrea underplays herself. She's a graduate of Juilliard. Who did you study with there?
Carol Wincense
Oh, Carol,
was
yes.
yeah. I actually started with Jeannie Backstresser my first 2 years because I initially wanted to be an orchestral player. Isn't that funny? Well, I love orchestral music. I always have. And I love being part of that group and collaboration. But as years went on, I saw there was more to flute playing and music making than just sitting in an orchestra. And I saw a lot of unique opportunities, and I really got into a lot of more world music and electronic music while I was studying at Juilliard. And I really wanted to carve my own path in the music world rather than be part of an orchestra or a group. So I was really influenced by world music when I was in New York. I was taking bansuri lessons and shakuhachi lessons while I was a student at Juilliard, just to have those other forms of flute playing. And I would even perform them on recitals at Juilliard. I remember one, I played bansuri, and I had a friend who played the tabla, and we played a traditional raga for my senior recital. So I've always liked different flutes and different forms of classical music from around the world, and not just classical music, traditional music. So, those influences are still with me now in these projects that I've been doing.
Now, interviews usually start from the back. In other words, we normally start from where it started. Where did you begin? And then the interviews normally lead up to the present. However, I'd like to reverse this by speaking first about your latest project, and one, as you know, I absolutely adore, AyaTunes. So by starting here, it gives us the opportunity to play some excerpts of a couple of the tracks as we move through this podcast, because you listen to one and it doesn't always do justice to the whole album, which is phenomenal. So before we speak about the AyaTunes or AyaTunes albums, and why you composed and created them, I'd like to invite the listeners to gently close their eyes for a moment, as long as you're not driving, of course, as we listen to a part of the beautiful Kuna Lullaby from AyaTunes Volume 2 by Andrea Fisher. Oh, stunning and so wonderfully put together. Where did the inspiration come from to not just write and produce one album, but three?
Okay, so I've always been a meditator for the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I practice transcendental meditation. Again, there's no music involved. It's just a mantra and just quieting the mind. And I also do another form of, I don't know if you want to call it meditation. It's medicine. It's plant medicine, and one of them is ayahuasca. That's where the name comes from, AyaTunes. So I was in one of these medicine ceremonies, and they're healing ceremonies, and I've learned so much from this. And this has been something I've practiced for 5 or 6 years. I don't go to these ceremonies more than 2 or 3 times a year. You really can't. They're so life changing, and I felt like I really heard music for the first time again in one of these ceremonies, which is crazy because obviously I hear music all the time and it's been my life, but I heard things. The person who's in charge of these ceremonies, I could call him a healer or a curandero. He played music from other artists, and sometimes music is performed live. So I almost heard, hearing is a sense. We have 5 senses. I almost heard a sixth or seventh sense of I would call it more of a vibration in the sound. I was hearing the sound, but I wasn't hearing the music. It was more of a vibratory, energetic field, if that makes any sense at all. And I was writing stuff down, even though it was dark. You're in these ceremonies, you're on your back on yoga mats all night. But I was writing down all these notes I was hearing about the music. And by the end of it, I was like, I have to write my own and incorporate what I heard, these powerful vibrations of sound and light, and they were almost like new sounds. And, to take the listener on a journey, because I felt like the music was such an important part of my journey in this. And without it, it would have been a totally different experience. So when I did start making these albums, which was probably 2017, I think, I felt that journey. I felt that this is really going somewhere. This is going to open up the listener's mind and just take them to a place, hopefully. And I think you explained it well. This music has the ability to go places that maybe other music does not, I guess.
Yeah, to me, it's the more you listen to it, it's complex simplicity. In that you don't hear the same each time you listen to it. Because as you say, if you allow yourself to be free when you're listening, nothing is the same. You go on a very different journey each time you listen to it. So it's not.
I love that.
It's not your usual. I've just hit my microphone, by the way. It's not your usual sort of meditation music. There is something very special in the depth of it, and I like. For me, it is complex simplicity.
I love that description, complex simplicity. Yeah, it is different every time. I don't even want to call it meditation music, because I think that has
absolutely
almost
agree.
Like,
yeah.
When someone says meditation music, you think of like when you're getting a massage or you're at the spa and it's just like this, and it doesn't go anywhere. It's meant for that purpose. But this music, I don't really have a genre for it. It could be called medicine music. It's played in these, now that I have these albums, it's played in many of these ceremonies. Many people who lead these use my music. And I've had, it's been so gratifying to get these messages and email WhatsApps from people all around the world saying, I just heard your music in ceremony and it changed my life. I discovered, my relationship with my father after listening to this track, and I apologized to him. Very, very profound things, life things happen in these ceremonies. And a lot of people that hear the music, they associate it with those powerful experiences that they've had. And I've had people crying. I go to these ceremonies too, and sometimes I do play, or mostly I participate, but people saying how much this music has meant to them. And for me, getting that feedback, or just, seeing the power that music really has to heal. I wasn't getting that from classical music, and I love classical music. I still play and practice. Obviously not as much as I used to, but seeing how powerful this has been only makes me want to do more and reach more people. And it's not just for people in these medicine ceremonies. Anyone can listen to these and hopefully feel something.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Not pigeonhole it in meditation. And meditation has been taken over by the wider society. And meditation at its simplest form is when you are just present. And as you say, with what you do with TM, you're doing a gentle mantra. What I do, Vipassana, I'm sitting in silence and I'm watching thoughts come in, and I play with the thoughts just in case some insight comes in. But with this music, you're exactly right. I think it has the ability to unlock if you allow it to. So you don't have to be in a formal meditation session. If you just listen to this, and I would recommend that you listen with headphones on, because your focus is then completely on this music, and just allow yourself to be. And I think you're be really surprised that things do unblock. We're such complex beings, but we're quite simple in our heads, really. And sometimes we filter all these feelings and thoughts away into this subconscious mind, into our filing cabinet. And sometimes it just takes this piece of music, or this, as you've created this layers of textures, just to unlock and unblock something. And it just comes in, doesn't it? Like a wow.
Yeah. And I think about that when I compose these, and I don't call myself a composer at all, but I guess I am in a sense, not the traditional, like, I don't write anything down. This all comes from improvisation. So, I can talk a little about my process with this. Nothing is written down. I go to the studio with a blank slate, and the studio has, a variety of keyboards. And usually it starts with me laying down some kind of chords or pads, or maybe I have an idea for a flute melody. So, something like this. This is just a Native American flute I'm going to be playing. So, sometimes I have these ideas in my head and I just want to record them. So I usually, when these albums come about, I have a few weeks in a studio of just working every day pretty consistently. And usually I come up with about, 10 to 15 different ideas that some are formed into these long form tracks. And the music on these they're not pop songs. They're not 4-minute
no,
hits.
they're not. No.
These go on for 25 minutes though. They're a journey. They're a meditation. Listening to one of these tracks is the amount of time that I meditate. 20-ish minutes is the amount of time that is a normal, get in that space thing. So it often starts as just an idea, and then I do all the layering of things on the keyboards. I tell the engineer, I don't engineer it. I'm not a Pro Tools master or anything. I know basic things, like I can look on the Pro Tools session and say, okay, let's add a flute here. And I have an amazing group of musicians that I work with on these. So I'm doing all of the keyboard stuff and the flutes. But I have an amazing singer. Her name is Mahalakshmi. She's based in India. So we, since the beginning, we've been recording her remotely. And we just we meaning the engineer and I just send her kind of a basic track and go back and forth. And she just gets it. She's American, but has lived in India and studies Indian music. and performs over there. So she's been on actually all the projects so far, and she's kind of that signature voice, and I just love working with her. And also some string players, sitar, some crazy vocalists on the third album. There was this guy, he makes bird sounds from his voice and animal sounds. He was actually the winner of Georgia's Got Talent. He's Georgian, like the country Georgia. I've never met him either. He's recorded remotely. And that some of the things he can do, that he imitates the jungle, and it's just, wow, okay, a person is doing that. So I have a huge network of these world musicians and also these medicine musicians that have been on all these projects. Also, an amazing bansuri virtuoso, Steve Gorn. But I've also just done a lot of flutes and keyboards and things like that.
When I started this by saying it was complex simplicity, do you find yourself having to draw back on some of the tracks? Because what has gone out there on your albums, it just seems to be right. That you haven't overlaid it with lots of instruments. There's a purity there. It's almost as though you knew where the river was starting, and when it sort of went into this big sea, you sort of followed it gently along, but without crowding it.
It's funny you say purity, because that's what I strive for in all of this. Even though some of it is very complex and some of it gets really intense at times, I feel that the purity and simplicity of this also really gives it that signature, I guess, of this type of music. I'm always looking for the most simple structure and sounds and pure voice, pure tones of everything. I don't like too much, like when I have classical players, I don't want a lot of vibrato. For my own self, I've always loved a very, very pure flute tone, and that's classically too. But sometimes the string players get a little too classical, and I'm like, just dumb it down, and not dumb it down, but don't think so classically. That's actually, for me, never really been an issue with this music, because I separate it. It's something totally different than anything I learned at school or in any type of classical studies. And I don't think of those things. I think of being in that meditation space and what I'd want to hear and what would be a journey, a sound journey.
And when you're in a meditation space, there's that place of safety. It's that place of where you can begin to explore whatever you wish if it comes into your mind. And that's what your music does get complex, and it creates sort of slight ripples, but you need that to be able to unblock, because otherwise the thoughts would be stagnant, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think with this music, there are these parts of just almost nothingness, and like you were saying with the ripples, and I think with anything, you can't there would be no such thing as silence without sound, and vice versa. There would be no light without darkness. So you have to go through those, you have to embrace that darkness and that shadow in the music. And then it just opens up, and, and you really feel that opening up, but you wouldn't if something wasn't stirring, and then it's just this release. So I do play around with that in a lot of things, but yeah, I don't think of it as a structural thing. It just comes to me, and it's just almost just all this stream of consciousness when I'm creating this music. I just keep going and take it to new places.
Shall we listen to another track from the album 2? Which one would you like us to play?
From the second album, that's the Dear Magic.
Yeah, Dear Magic.
Well, the title track, I could also talk about deer, but that would be an entirely different podcast. Deer have been almost this power animal. These deer have come into my life after doing these ceremonies, and I I love deer. I even have an Instagram account for deer just because I love them so much. The spirit of these animals, their gentleness, their awareness, gracefulness, calm, and this almost mysterious characteristic. I wrote one of the songs called Deer Magic, which is also the name of the album. So you can play that. I think it really embodies the spirit of that animal, and that's what it's honoring. And the Native American flute starts the track, and I actually was playing it for deer, and it just stayed in my head, and I started the track with the melody of the deer.
So let's listen to Deer Magic from AyaTune's album 2. So you may now be getting the impression that I'm a huge fan of these beautiful albums. And we'll no doubt have a little bit more later in the podcast. But before we do so, before I forget, please tell everybody how they can download these.
Okay, well, right now they're available on Bandcamp, AyaTunes, AYITUNES, or .bandcamp.com. What we're doing with these now, there are 3 albums out now, and I just recorded a 4th in Belgrade, which I did starting around February of this year in a studio out there. And the reason I went to Belgrade to record, that's a whole interesting pandemic story. Serbia was one of the only places that was taking in Americans, traveling. We couldn't really go anywhere. And everything was still shut down at the time. And, I was really like, I need to create. I don't have a home studio, obviously, and I could never get it to the level that a professional engineer could. So I was talking to the ceremony leader who's, kind of in charge of these projects. And we have eventually came up with a contact of ours who worked in a studio in Serbia and recommended this great studio. And so I get this text saying, would you be willing to go to Serbia? and this is in like late January 2021, where everything was closed here. I'm like, yes, I'll get on a plane tomorrow. Just got my test and got on the plane and was in Belgrade for about 3 months doing this project, and also just being able to explore Eastern Europe, which was fascinating in itself because I had never spent any time in Eastern Europe, never been to Serbia. I got to Slovenia, an amazing place. I would watch these gypsy musicians on the street, and they were children, and they had, they had these old souls, and you could tell in the way that they played and sang that this was in their blood, this music. And I would go to this like shopping street and just watch these kids every day, and they were so talented and so inspiring, and just something totally different that I had never seen before. So I really, fell in love with Eastern Europe, and, not just by doing my project, but also by listening and getting inspired by other musicians. And for this project that I did in Belgrade, it's not out yet. So this, I should mention, and for everything you had said, it's best to listen on headphones. So the fourth installment of AyaTunes, as well as the 3 albums that are already out, are going to be re-released as an app. And
nice.
Yes, yeah, I'm very excited about that. So this is something that's pretty new, and it relates to the Atmos headphones, which are 3D headphones that Apple is coming out with, and also 3D speakers. So everything's going to be this 3D sound. So what we did in Belgrade was, we did everything traditionally, stereo mixes, but then there's an engineer out in Berlin who's doing 3D mixes. So he got the stems meaning like every track raw, and he's mixing them in a 3D landscape. So I know that might sound confusing, but the way I explain it is, think of VR, of virtual reality, but for your ears, for audio. So, you have these headphones on and you turn around and you hear a certain sound, and you go down and then you hear a voice or flutes over here. So that's going to be out in a few months. I'm hoping by the end of this year. The app creation and the 3D mixes obviously is more involved than just making the music. It's a lot of tech stuff. So
Absolutely. I've had the opportunity to actually try listening to some of the 3D music. It is so profound because, as you say, a slight movement and something else comes in, and it gives you the ability. It's different from surround sound, by the way, everybody. It relies a lot on, say, as you look to your left, just something different comes in, and it really encompasses your whole body. So I can see this as being... It will take your music and what you've created to a completely different level.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear it myself. I haven't actually heard the 3D mixes yet. We're testing a beta version probably in a few weeks. Like I mentioned, this is being done in Berlin. So we have a whole international community doing this. I'm the music maker and the composer, and then we have engineers in various places in Belgrade, and the first engineer was in Los Angeles, and then the 3D team and the app team is in Berlin. So I'm really excited to launch this, and it's a whole different thing. The app will have stereo mixes on it as well for people who don't have the 3D headphones or the speakers. So you can also listen that way, but the main goal of this is to be able to have this new 3D landscape of sound. And I'm so excited about this project, and to release the 4th album, the Belgrade Project. And I had so many great Balkan musicians, a flutist who plays the Kaval flute. I'm not sure if you're familiar
No, I
with
haven't.
that.
No.
I couldn't get a sound out of it. It's something, you almost play it on the side of your mouth. The embouchure is so off. I couldn't do it. But this guy was a master at it. Amazing. We also had an oud, which is a string instrument that's very powerful in there. Yes, and some kalimbas and some very world sounds as well.
Well, I'm sure you've all been to a 3D movie, and I'm sure most of you will have had the opportunity to look at virtual reality. My one experience of 3D sound was probably more profound than experience the visual side of it. Because as musicians, we're visual, but also a large part of what we bring in is auditory. And when you bring 3D sound into your head or into your ears, something happens that just brings everything alive. And when I talk about layers, I'm talking about layers not just upwards, I'm talking about layers sideways. And then it's crazy. It is like this huge, great vehicle that is not just sort of one-dimensional, but the sound has so many different levels and areas and angles to it. It's just wonderful.
And I think it's the perfect platform for this type of music.
Oh, isn't it just?
Yeah. So I can't wait.
So Andrea, you're the only person I know that is known by a word that isn't your name. So people know you. People refer to you, and always have done, as FluterScooter. And it's the name of your bags. Yes. And I don't think many people actually know your name. So this may be the first time a lot of people will know that you're called Andrea Fisher, because to most people you are FluterScooter.
Yeah, that name it stuck, didn't it? How that name came about is an interesting story. I was working right after graduation. I was working in a lot of hip hop music and going to hip hop studios. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with hip hop, but everyone has like a fake name or just like a street name, which some of them are hilarious. And when you actually know the person's real name, I wouldn't have known anyone's real name, their government name, as they call them. So right after graduation, I had a scooter. It was almost like one of those food delivery scooters, because in New York nobody had them at the time. This was like 2004. So I was riding around the city in one of these scooters. I loved it because I was in Brooklyn, so I would go into Manhattan, and these sessions happened quite late at night, and the trains didn't run, and I don't know if you know New York, when it's 4 a.m, it's hard to get back to Brooklyn from Manhattan unless you want to take a cab, and I didn't, a broke recent graduate, I couldn't afford taxis all the time, so I had a scooter. And I was, showing up to the studio with this scooter and a flute on my back. I had a Hello Kitty yoga mat bag. So I would keep, it's funny because it fit my Native American flute in it too, because it was quite long. Think of a yoga mat. So I fit a bunch of flutes in it, and I had it on my back on the scooter. So one of the guys was like, yo, you're FluterScooter, and then everyone else is like, yeah, FluterScooter. So the name just kind of stuck then, and so I'm on a lot of these hip hop albums as FluterScooter, and that's how it had nothing to do with bags. I didn't even do bags then. It was just, that was my kind of artist name. And then when the bags came along, I just naturally called it FluterScooter, because I don't know, it seems not everyone has a scooter, but it's the lifestyle of FluterScooter. It's a lifestyle brand almost, and thought it was an appropriate name. So that FluterScooter has been around for a while. And it's easier for people to remember, I think Andrea Fisher is a nice name, nice enough, but it's not a superstar name. It's not a name like Madonna. I'm not comparing myself to Madonna. I'm just saying, people will remember that one name rather than, there are a lot of Andreas, there are a lot of Fishers. I just never felt like it was a name that stuck out. So I just kept going with FluterScooter, and everyone still knows me as that. Now this music, I think I say Andrea FluterScooter Fisher.
You
So
do, yeah.
at least I have both there. But yeah, FluterScooter mainly now refers to the flute bags.
It'd be so funny, wouldn't it, for all the flute players out there to have their own hip hop name?
I can't say anyone else does, but who
No.
knows? Maybe there's some out there.
No.
There's Lizzo. There's Lizzo.
There's
but
Lizzo, yeah.
But she's not. I mean, I wouldn't call her a flute player. She has a FluterScooter bag, two of them actually.
Oh, does she?
Believe it or not. Yeah, her management called me. I don't know where they found me. Or sent me an email saying, we want some bags for Lizzo. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I've made it. That was like one of those moments.
Well, I think that's stunning. And your bags, your bags really have become synonymous with, I wouldn't just say professional flute players, I'd say all flute players, because they're stylish, but most importantly, as you've explained why, they're totally functional.
Yeah, I think pretty much most flute players know what a FluterScooter bag is, and they know where they can get them.
Yeah.
On my website, all the dealers are listed. I don't sell direct anymore. That's something that changed with the pandemic. I kind of shifted over to just doing having dealers sell them, and I still promote them, but also I should mention, right now, it's kind of in a transitional phase. I'm in the process of moving my production and manufacturing to the States.
Wow, that is huge. That is big,
Yeah.
big news, everybody.
Yeah, it's something that I've wanted to do for a while now. And I think, everyone has good things that come out of this pandemic, and things that have made you pivot. If you have a business, have made you pivot in a certain direction. And that it started with me not being able to travel overseas, to Asia, and I was going to China maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I'd be at Music China next month, but that all stopped. And I had wanted to be in the States for a while. I had wanted to be able to just drive or fly easily to my factory and just oversee things, be more hands-on. And so it's not just that. I'm also shifting to move to mostly sustainable materials. And I have done that in China. I have the eco bag out, and I've been using some of those materials but sourcing them overseas. But there's so many great resources in the States, which I'm learning. I just got a fabric swatch yesterday with a recycled bottle brand here. So, this is a work in progress. And when it is official, believe me, everyone will hear about it. So, right now, the existing FluterScooter bag line is available from dealers. But another branch of this work has been what we call in the industry as OEM, original equipment manufacturing. So I am actually, people might not know this because I don't have my logo or my brand on, but every Brannon leather case cover is something that I've designed with them. Powell, some conducting baton bags. It's so important right now. I mean, as you're seeing all over the world, climate change is really becoming a scary thing. It's evolving into something quite, I would say, scary. All the fires and all the waste and we're seeing, and the pollution. And as I was talking about deer, that's one of the reasons. Wild animals' environments are being destroyed and polluted, and humans, of course, as well. But when I go to these places, I was in Vietnam, and that was the last country I went to in Asia before the pandemic. I had been there, I think, November 2019. I loved the country, but I saw so much waste in the water, and these were beautiful tourist spots that used to be pristine, but there was so much plastic in the water. It was disgusting. I almost didn't even want to go. I was like, I don't even want to be here. It felt so dirty and wrong. And, that's just one place. But, sustainability in fashion is luckily where things are taking a direction right now. I think a lot of people are waking up. A lot of people are seeing the need for getting getting this plastic waste problem under control. I mean, there are so many other things to be doing as well, but it's just one way that this brand can help. And it all relates to this music too, because this this music is often inspired by nature, and so, yeah, I think it all relates to each other.
There's time distortion going on in your life, isn't there?
Oh, totally. But, I just use my time very constructively. I actually sleep quite a lot, which is, people are very surprised when they know that when my bedtime is. And I have the bedtime of like a 6-year-old. I'm asleep unless I have a concert or something, I'm asleep by 9:00.
Wow.
PM. Yeah. But then I'm a very early riser. I'm up at 5 normally. I get most of my work done, I'd say, before most people are awake. But the reason for that is also China hours have put me on that schedule. I have to be up to send texts back and forth with China. So to get them before they're done with the workday, it's so that I have had to have that balance, but it's just now that's how my schedule is, and I'm just so used to that. But I sleep quite a lot, and I think it's very important. A lot of us burn ourselves out by not sleeping enough, and stress and all of that. Meditation also, by practicing TM, you have those extra. It's constructive. It's rest. Even if it's just 20 minutes, it's still, it adds to that. And a lot of my most creative ideas come during meditation or after meditation. I'm like, okay. So it's just that I think I just use my hours very well. And I act on things right away.
Are you a list person? Do you write stuff down, or does it all come naturally to you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I do make a lot of lists. This is typical.
Yes.
And this is very messy. I just write things down. Any idea that comes in my head, I write it down. And some things work, some things don't. Some things are just thoughts. Some things develop. I do everything myself. And I think that helps in a way, because, training other people and just having other people's schedules and back and forth, when you can do everything yourself and when you can wear all those hats, I think it makes things a lot easier. If that makes sense.
I'm sure you're simplifying the whole process, because most of us, when we're doing one thing, we get totally obsessed with one, and the thought, if something else comes in and something else comes in. And also, let's not forget that you're a musician. You still play the flute.
Yes.
Do you get time to get the flute out? Do you get time to practice stuff?
Well, I don't practice daily like I used to, but if I have something coming up, obviously I'm practicing for that. When I was performing my original music, I had to, what I did was I had to get the engineer to send me tracks without the flute line in it. So, and I had never done that before. So I was listening to these things. And of course, this performance was outdoor, which was that all the elements involved in that with your sound and the wind and little cicadas in the background. There was that, but just being able to play along to these tracks was a whole new experience. And I loved that. I loved starting that process. And now I know that I can play these live and, in a certain type of atmosphere. So I would love to do more of that. Classically, for even that performance, I had to practice my scales and my long tones and just things like that, fingering things like that. But, this music is not very technical, so I don't really have to worry there. And, if the opportunity is right, if the right performance comes along, I will play classically, but my focus really isn't there at the moment. When I'm in the studio recording this music, like when I was recently in Belgrade, I was warming up, at home, maybe a half an hour or so before going into the studio, just to have
rubbery chops for everybody else. Yes.
Yeah. So, I have been able to balance all of it. I think anyone can. I don't think it's unique to me. I think anyone can if they really put their mind to it. But meditating helps. I do recommend meditation, and I think that's why I'm so glad I found your Happy Flutist site and this podcast, because a lot of this does have to do with meditation. And the other tracks on the Happy Flutist are amazing, and the guided meditations, and I think it's such a fantastic resource. And I thank you for having that for not just flute players, but musicians and anyone.
Oh, you're very sweet, and it brings us back to how we started the podcast, doesn't it? To AyaTunes, everything, and I'm totally with you. Meditation, if you haven't done it, can transform your life, and there are so many different types of meditations and styles of meditations. I implore you all to find your own, to explore. Whatever faith, whether you have a faith or you don't have a faith, wherever you are, it is a non-judgmental process that can radically transform how you think, and also opens up your creativity. And this is where I listen to a lot of meditation music, mostly in the background. And that's why I say with AyaTunes, it's okay to have it on in the background, but you miss so much when it's coming directly into your head. Every time you listen to it is a different experience. And we started with AyaTunes and we've come back to it. And for me, I look forward to hearing the fourth, but I'm really, really excited for the new 3D project.
Thanks. And I should also mention, I get one of these some messages I got recently is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with psychedelic therapy. So there are therapists that use psychedelic medicine, and it is legal now in some facilities in the States. So someone has been using my music to assist in these, almost in therapy, in a therapy session. It's just done differently, but the patient is often with headphones, a very good pair of headphones, lying down with various very small doses of medicine, and it's played, and therapists are playing it. And I think that's just so cool, to have that music is for this healing, this healing that so many people need, especially now, and especially, during these pandemic times. I think healing is through music is something that could be so powerful, and also meditation. And I think there are many ways to, I guess, clear the clutter and get quiet. And
I saw interesting you mentioned that. I saw a documentary recently on the BBC. I think it was on the BBC about exactly that. They were trialing it in the UK, and the transformative nature. And it was a single process or a double process, so it didn't go on very long. The person would be one or two meetings or going through it. You had to have a qualified therapist with you.
Yeah, of course.
But it was completely transformative to them. So I know they're looking into that at a deeper level, because, as you say, some of the medicines haven't necessarily been legalized for use over here. But if there can be a therapeutic use and it can unblock things, then there's only one way for it to go. Yeah. Oh, you've been so kind to join us today. You've been really, really generous with your time, because you've heard today, Andrea's doing so much. And yet she's up early in the morning, still looks fresh as a daisy, knowing full well that as soon as she puts the phone down, or as soon as she puts the Zoom line down, she's busy. So thank you so, so much.
Hey, thank you. It's been great to be able to talk about this. I don't often talk about this music project. It's mostly bags or other things, entrepreneurship, but this was great to be able to talk about this, and also our backgrounds in meditation. And so thank you.
Well, I'm not going to let it drop, because I love it. And, okay, we're not going to meet at NAMM next year in January because they've cancelled it. But yes.
Yeah, June. They didn't cancel it. They postponed it.
Yeah, there's June, but there's also at the big NFA in Chicago next year, the big 50th. So if it's not going to be in January, we'll cross barriers in August, won't we?
We will at some point soon. So.
Yes.
Until then, it will be Zoom.
It will have to be Zoom. So shall we gently close the podcast with another track from the second album? No, say second album, because I'm loving that at the moment. I think it's too easy to go through them all, because there's so many tracks in all the albums. It's too easy to go through them all without sort of indulging in one album before we move on to another one. So if we take the second album, which one should we close the podcast with?
Voices of the Distant Forest is a nice one, because I play several flutes. I do a Chinese flute on that one, and some little whistles.
Little whistles. So we'll close to Voice of the Distant Forest from AyaTunes Volume 2 by Andrea FluterScooter Fisher. And once again, thank you so, so much for joining me on Talking Flutes podcast this week. And for all you for listening. And may your week ahead be musically fulfilling, and may your third octave F sharp be stable and beautiful. Goodbye, everybody. Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.